All right. It looks like we're live for Beyond the Ballot 104, a live stream. So, before we get started, let me just say please bear with me, being as I'm utilizing my shitty satellite internet because I live way out in the woods. So, if you get some choppiness to the stream and whatnot, let me know in chat. We'll see what we can do. This is mostly an experiment, but yeah, hopefully it goes pretty well. Before we get started, while I'm waiting for people to get in chat so we can do some vibing, let me just say the usual intro. So what's up, everybody? I'm Nick Irwin. This is Beyond the Ballot. This is a show where I spotlight people taking action, philosophy, real-world solutions, anything else that can make a difference outside of the masturbatory action of participating in the political circus. Today, I want to talk about some of the idea that we might be getting into the next American Civil War. That will be, it's pretty interesting, and I got a lot of stuff to talk about with that, and hopefully I can get your opinions and whatnot. Yes, vibe check, David, that's right. And also, before we get started, let me say huge thank you to the Beyond the Ballot super supporters, Maxwell, Dave, and Dennis. They're super supporters on the Patreon. You can see that at the top left of the screen. It's patreon.com/beyondtheballot. And Dave and Dennis are also show producers via the Patreon. So thank you all very much for supporting my work. I really appreciate it. Beyond the Ballot is also officially sponsored by Project Sparta. Now is the time to get healthy and in shape, and Greg Papanicholas is going to get you there with personalized meal plans, training, group support, and tons of amazing fitness and motivational resources and knowledge, including the Project Sparta Facebook group. You can go to projectspartacoaching.com and learn more about Greg's work and get started on your path to health. In this crazy world we're living in, our health is more important than ever. Get up, start learning, communicating, and training. One of the most important and often neglected things in life is your physical health. Get to projectspartacoaching.com now and get after it. Also, all you bearded brothers out there, I know David and Adam have beards. Shout out to Voluntary Apothecary. Voluntary Apothecary is here to fulfill all of your beard care needs. They carry beard oil, mustache wax, beard butter, and more. I only use their beard care products, and I love them. You can check out their amazing products at voluntарyapothecary.com. Listeners of the show, you can take 10% off your order with code DANK and code BEYOND at checkout, and they now accept PayPal. So don't leave that shit in the cart. Get that stuff. All right. How's it sounding, guys? How we looking? Hopefully it's all right. Hopefully there's only a little bit of glitchiness with the video feed, but hopefully you can still hear me. But yeah, continuing on, let's talk about if we're in the next American Civil War or not, if we're in the beginning of it. It's pretty fucking interesting. I've been listening to two really good podcasts. One of them, and I know this is podcast suicide, promoting other better podcasts than mine, but one of them is called Behind the Bastards. It's hosted by Robert Evans. It's really good about all the bastards in history, and you'll see if you listen to this that there are a lot of bastards in history, and history, as we know, is extremely cyclical. We see the same things happening over and over, especially from government over and over, and nothing seems to change. And the other podcast is It Could Happen Here, which is also hosted by Robert Evans, which is talking about the potential for a second American Civil War. And so Robert Evans is a very interesting cat. I want to try to get him on the show at some point. He's obviously a podcaster, but also a journalist that's been all over the world during different civil conflicts, civil wars, all that kind of stuff. He was embedded with units in the Middle East, with the American units in the Middle East, and has some really interesting experiences from being over there. He was in the Ukraine during their beginnings of their conflict. He's been in Syria during that stuff. He's been there before and after all these things started. He has some really interesting insights on why he thinks we're heading that way and might possibly already be in the beginnings of a next American Civil War. So if you're interested in that, check those out. But he's also, something that's been really interesting for me is that he's self-admitted extremely biased towards the left as far as American political culture. And that usually isn't something that I think that I, am interested in hearing about. I don't think a lot of people are interested in left-right political culture who listen to this show anymore. I think myself, I know I am more interested in being left the fuck alone. I know most of you are too that listen to this show. But so with that being said, there's one episode that I listened to of It Could Happen Here called The Revenge of Rural America. And it's got some really important information. He talks about the divide between urban, cities, the people in there, and rural Americans, and why there's such a divide and why there's so much strife and even hate between the two. And it goes really deep. Part of it being the people in the cities, their attitude towards people in rural America, thinking they're all bumpkins, rednecks, whatever. And then the people in rural America that grow the food for the entire country. This is not grown in cities, and how they feel they're being fucked over. It's similar to the Yellow Vest protests in France, how they started protesting over that proposed gas tax that went through and then was repealed, that just fucks over people in rural areas way more than people in cities. They're trying to apply blanket rules to everybody everywhere rather than letting people do their own thing. And it's like, well, right, that's not going to work. We know that. That's how that goes. And that's why people get mad about it. Adam, yes, I think that's correct. I think humans are at continual civil war at varying levels. Yeah, I agree. There's that meme. And what the fuck is that meme? It's a really good one. Oh yeah, it's a picture of, a scene from a war and then a picture of just a suburban neighborhood, and it says that war is the reality and peace is temporary. It's not the nature of the world. It's something to be fought for and hold on to. It's something that doesn't always last. And that's true. And we're definitely seeing a lot of strife right now over so many different things, and it's leading to so much divide. And I think that division is really the key point in looking at whether or not we're going into a second American Civil War. And I posted about this on my personal Facebook page, and I was asking people if they thought that we were in a second Civil War, or at the beginning of a second Civil War, why or why not. And a lot of people kind of confused it with the idea of a revolution. First of all, I don't want a revolution. I don't want to overthrow government and install another government. That's not what I want. When I'm referencing another civil war, I'm not thinking North versus South, left versus right, anything like that. I guess it could be defined more as a civil conflict in which there's going to be many sides. And this is something that Robert Evans does cover in his podcasts, and it's really interesting because it's more than left versus right. There's so many subgroups in all of these, and then you have us. You have anarchists, you have libertarians, agorists, all these different people, all these different subcategories who are already, some of us are peaceful with others. Some of the groups overlap and, can work together, but a lot of them, joke and even threaten each other. Think about the helicopter memes versus, the gulags memes. We got left versus right and anarchy or anything. There's this huge split that splinters out everywhere. Yeah, Adam says we all have a left-right bias, but it's really inconsequential when you apply voluntary interaction to it. Exactly. And I was very surprised to see not necessarily the application of voluntary interaction from Robert Evans in this podcast that I'm referencing. It Could Happen Here. But he admitted that there's a problem with the cities and those population centers, which are usually left-leaning as far as American politics, trying to force their, governance on everybody around them who don't agree with them. He admits that it needs to be handled differently in let them do their thing that's fair to them, and we'll do our thing fair to us. And I was surprised to hear that from his left American political stance. I think that's incredibly reasonable. That's another reason I really like listening to the guy's show, is because he has a very reasonable, unbiased reporting style for the most part. And that's really important. But so when you apply the idea in a way that, this show, Go Beyond the Ballot would do, how an anarchist or even maybe a libertarian would do, you get to a point where we could have, easy trade between these areas without trying to force nonsense taxes and regulations that don't fit what everyone's doing in those areas to make it a sustainable, prosperous, smooth. Even if it wasn't no government whatsoever, there's a better way to do government. And that's what leads, once again, back to the idea, in my mind, of an American civil conflict, Civil War II, is because everybody's focusing on these government solutions. They want government to figure out a plan for everybody. And even if it comes down to states, that would be better, but it's going to be the same thing. That's where we're seeing most of the problems, is in state governance, is in the state blanket legislating all of these areas that can't be done smoothly because they're so different. But anyways, I want to kind of get back to the idea of the different factions in this. One thing that a lot of people focus on, besides, I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with the rural versus urban areas, is the idea of these state separatists, the people who want Jefferson to secede from California. And up here in Washington and Idaho, there's all these different secession movements as well. And if you look into a lot of them, specifically the one in Idaho, I know the term gets thrown around a lot, but it is actually run by an actual white supremacist. Like, the guy that put this all together and is the most heavy-handed in it is an actual white supremacist. And so I'm thinking of these different separatist movements that I think are okay. I think it's fine to want to separate, to secede, and break it down and keep going from there. But you have to be careful who you throw your lot in and with. And I don't know if we'll have an easy choice if things continue to break down as hard as they're breaking down now. We, being anarchists, people who want to be left alone, who aren't involved with any of these movements, who don't take a hard left or right stance, there's going to be, judging by what's happened in other places, judging by the massive group movements that are happening now with the different riots and whatnot in the cities, it's not a place for individuals. It's a place and a time when people will be forced into joining with groups that they don't agree with or align with for the sake of safety, for survival, for anything like that. Back to It Could Happen Here, he starts it out kind of laying out fictionally what it would be like a day in the life of the beginnings of a hot Civil War II, where, buildings have been shelled around you, food supplies are disrupted, there's grocery store runs, but most people will be trying to maintain a relatively normal life in the midst of all this. A lot of people won't be out there shooting and joining movements until they absolutely have to. They're going to be trying to live their normal life in the midst of all this chaos. And his fictional idea of this isn't wrong. There's multiple accounts of people doing just this. There's a great article I found. I can't remember who shared it, but it was absolutely amazing. From somewhere, I believe near India, I have to look it up, about a civil conflict there. And it was a guy who was in his 20-somethings when this was happening around him. And he's like, we were doing everything that normal people do. We were trying to go out and drink and hang out with friends, playing games around the table, dating, all that kind of stuff. And this is all going on around us. And he wrote this article as a warning to other people who think that, first of all, something like that can't happen where you are. And second of all, you're not going to notice necessarily at the beginning. You won't notice until your house, your building, whatever gets shelled. You won't notice this stuff happening, and eventually you might have to make a choice. in It Could Happen Here, there was a person that Robert Evans interviewed, I think, interviewed with his partner. There were two 20-something-year-old software developers who were just running aid to people running these resistance actions against whatever side was there at the time. They were running aid to people who were protecting their town, their area, and were staying out of the actual conflict as long as possible, and ended up getting caught up in an actual line against heavily armed, I guess, riot police, it sounded like, in Ukraine. And he asked, how did you, because you're small, both of you are small people and software developers, you're not warriors, you're not soldiers, you're not people who have done this before. How did you end up getting in there? And it's just kind of what happens. It's almost wrong place, wrong time, or right place, right time, depending on how you look at it. You're going to end up in a situation like that, possibly. And they were successful. There's a lot of things that you can do without joining a hardline like them, running aid, just helping out your community, which is a whole nother really interesting part of civil conflicts, wars in general, is the psychology of it, especially for people who have issues like depression, anxiety, and all kinds of other issues, social anxiety issues that are almost turned around when these conflicts come in. They find meaning and throw themselves into that in aid and things like that. There's psychological studies for this that have been done for years and years, since the early 1900s, and it's pretty crazy. And then the most well-adjusted people tend to have more of a breakdown in these times. It's very interesting. I'll see if I can find some stuff to post about that in the description of this, some articles and whatnot, because it's really cool. David, as everything devolves into conflict, open or otherwise, where regular people are affected, anarchists, etc., need to come forward to provide support and solutions to those people to show another way. That's absolutely correct. Because in all this, and I'm not saying we need this. I'm not saying this should happen. This is a good thing. And neither is Robert Evans in his podcasts. In fact, he even has a podcast about how to avoid it, how he thinks we can avoid it. And it's exactly like you said, David. It's showing another solution, showing another way. I think that's totally fine to avoid it for as long as possible, for it to not happen, because it's going to be horrible. There's going to be terrible death. There's going to be all kinds of horrible, awful shit. I don't think it's good to wish that. I understand people yearning for it. It's like I said, with the psychological studies that have been done, there's a lot of people who do yearn for it and who flourish in that kind of environment. It's for a whole lot of different reasons. It's almost a release, this buildup, everything that's been happening now, all the injustice in the law enforcement system, in politics in general, the riots, everything like that. It's really, and the fucking debates and all this stuff. It's just a fucking huge buildup to what? And people pick something, civil war maybe, and it's like, fucking come on already, just do it. So all this buildup and stress and anxiety can be over with, or so you can have something to throw yourself into. And it's really interesting coming at it from the perspective of an anarchist, from the perspective of someone who doesn't want to replace this system with another government system. Because it's hard not to say, yeah, bring it on. Let's do it. Let's carve out our piece. Let's find a way to be left alone through the chaos that would be an American civil conflict. It's a really fine line to walk, but I think you're absolutely right, David, in saying that providing support and solutions in another way are, first of all, if it's not a way to avoid it, it's a way to prepare people for it. And I don't know that it can be avoided. Like I was talking about before, how history is repeating, and how Adam said a continual civil war is always happening at varying levels. I don't know if it's avoidable. So preparing for it and helping others come to terms with these facts is extremely important, so people just aren't slaughtered in mass, who are totally unexpecting for this stuff to happen. David also said, then these people will be like, hey, these anarchists aren't what the state is making them out to be. They're providing a safe haven, food, defense, etc. And that's absolutely true. Which brings me to something else, too. Antifa, and yeah, that's the other thing. Antifa was providing a ton of mutual aid, or aid, I guess, for people during the fires and whatnot, right? On the West Coast. Providing food, shelter, all this stuff, massive gathering of this stuff to help people. They were out there doing it, and they weren't the only ones. But that was good image for them. That was good imaging. And that's been obviously a hot button discussion, Antifa, and whether or not it's just an idea or an organization. I'm not taking a stance on Antifa one way or the other. I prefer to judge people by their actions and not what they're wearing, what they look like, whether or not they're dressed like Black Bloc, Antifa, whatever or not, because I know, yes, those are separate things, supposedly, but I just had a long conversation last night about whether or not Antifa is an organization that I wanted to talk about, too, and see what you guys think, because I don't think it's an overarching national or even, global organization funded by Soros, but there are chapters, there are chapters in different cities. There's merch sold. There's organizing through those chapters and whatnot. I think it's incredibly dishonest to say that it's just an idea and they spontaneously come together for these protests. It's just friends going and hanging out. No, it's not. And that's fine. That's okay. It's why I don't understand why the idea of there being some organization horizontally, so I'm told, which it looks like it to me, for something like Antifa, for an idea, for a movement like Antifa, I don't know why that's a bad thing. Why resist the idea that there's organization to it? I don't think it's smart for them to have that organization if they don't want to be targeted by the state. We've seen them be labeled as domestic terrorists by Trump and possibly the FBI or whatever. I haven't followed up on that a lot, but it's similar to the Redacted Boys movement in the way that it is based around an idea. It's a movement based around an idea, but the difference with the Redacted Boys is that they aren't putting together these chapters that are publicly known, like Facebook pages. Like, you don't see fucking, Austin, Texas Boogaloo Boys. They communicate completely outside of that. They too are organized horizontally, from what I can tell from any of my alleged involvement with any Redacted Boys activity. But anytime you get away from that decentralization and start putting a structure to that organization, it opens you up to a lot of things. It's kind of a ramble on that, but it's also kind of ties into the different factions. Like, Antifa is not the American the individuals within any movement. It's a bunch of different stuff. And these are groups that you would see if there was a civil conflict, American Civil War II, Electric Boogaloo, out there coalescing and doing things, whether or not it's aggressive aid or whatnot. You're going to see Redacted. You're going to see Antifa. You're going to see 3 fucking percenters. You're going to see Proud Boys, Patriot Prayer, whatever. It's just completely ridiculous to me that all these labels are being thrown around and debated so heavily when that won't matter at all if this shit goes down. David says, everyone needs a boogeyman. Antifa is currently the right's boogeyman. Any label put on anything can be manipulated and warped by the state. Exactly. The other thing, it's not even the state necessarily that's warping. I mean, they are, but it's the opponents, whether it's politically or socially, that are manipulating and warping these labels. If we want to go the other route and talk about Proud Boys, because those are hot in the news right now, right after the debate, and Trump says, stand by, stand down, whatever. That's a whole nother issue. That's confusing and tangled. I don't really want to get into, but we look at Proud Boys and everyone's saying they're literally white supremacists. Well, literally looking at them, I don't see white supremacists. People are also saying they're racist. Sure, I can see that in their actions. I posted a video from All Gas No Brakes where he was at the most recent Proud Boy rally, and there was a journalist attacked because they looked like Antifa, proved they weren't there for that. They were just there for journalism, and they said, well, you're Middle Eastern anyway, so get the fuck out of here. You don't have to be an all-white group to be racist, whatever an all-white group would actually mean anyways, because that's another thing that gets fucking thrown around as well. But they have bad elements to them. That's a thing. That's okay to admit. I don't know why people are dying on the hill of denying every allegation against Proud Boys or Antifa or whatever it is. You know, it's not cool to be Western chauvinists, hyper-nationalists. You know, call it what it is. This labeling of everything as the most extreme evil that you can think of for the other side is not helping anything. It's creating more divides. It's completely inaccurate, and there's no more perfect meme for it than the everything I hate is X, a Nazi, a white supremacist, a communist, a fascist, a socialist, whatever. Everything I hate is X, a political or a child's guide to political discourse. It's what's happening right now because it's a childish emotional reaction to label something that you don't like as the worst possible thing it could be rather than what it is. And everyone gets so fucking mad that you don't agree with them on this. And it's, like I said, just furthering the divide. We need discourse. We need nuanced discussion. We need to talk about these things and not necessarily draw hard lines. Drawing hard lines is more centralization. We need decentralization to avoid the attention of the state should they want to start cracking down in an actual fascist manner or an actual authoritarian manner of any kind. If you're putting these hard lines and accepting them and joining a group like this and making it known, you're a target. Decentralization allows for so much, not just not being a target, but like you guys have mentioned in the comments right now, being able to easily aid people when they need it without getting snagged at, say, a checkpoint if those come about, and being identified with a group that is an enemy of the state at the time. There's so much to it. Yeah, I could probably go on and on about this for a long time. But let me pull up. So I mentioned, let me pull up and list off some stuff if you're interested in kind of following along with the possibility of a second American Civil War, of what it would look like if we're in it or not. I got a reading list from my buddy William Gadsden, who hopefully will be able to do a kind of a combo show about an American civil conflict at some point, whether or not it's an episode on here or an episode on one of his shows or maybe a whole new show entirely. We've been talking about that. But he sent me a great reading list. He's got a bunch of good stuff here. And so I'll list off some of these and I'll put them in the description too. And these are besides obviously the two podcasts I mentioned, Behind the Bastards and It Could Happen Here. But books like Clash of Civilizations by J.P. Huntington, Ghost Wars, Steve Cole, which is mentioned in those podcasts as well. Warfare in the Ancient World, because once again, history repeats. Civilian Warriors, the Cold War's Killing Fields, the Global Offensive. And then he also suggested that brushing up on the October Revolution, the breakup of Yugoslavia and the Spanish Civil War. I think those are great suggestions. I also think that looking into the conflicts in Ukraine and Syria are really important to look into. Also, Sebastian Junger, war correspondent, who's written a bunch of amazing books that I'm digging into right now. First one being Tribe and the second one being War. If you're prepared to see, or if you can see what's happened in other places that are similar to what's happening here, you might be able to make the right guesses, make the right predictions to keep yourself safe, and make the right choices if you have to join a side and whatnot. You won't be caught off guard, because I think it's going to be a slow crawl into this, as we've seen. We've seen a slow crawl towards authoritarianism, towards all kinds of nonsense for the last 8 years, if not longer. But I think it's been ramping up more in the last 8 years. And if you keep an eye on this stuff around you, one day when there's military or law enforcement checkpoints around your town or city or throughout your city or whatever, you're not going to be like, what the fuck is happening? You're going to know why this shit was coming, and you're going to be ready for it. Adam says, absolutely, the generalization of a group can demonize individuals in the group. I agree with a lot of different groups, but I try not to identify as any. Yeah, and I think that's important. That's why I did the rebrand as well, to Beyond the Ballot, for one of the reasons. I'm really sick of seeing what anarchist is portrayed as online in the media from person to person. I've always and still do really like that line, I just want to be left alone. I also want to help other people be left alone. I want more people to embrace freedom, because the more people, the more free we can be as individuals, in my opinion. You know, it's hard to be free when your neighbor's a slave. Yeah, it's just a whole tangled mess. But like I was saying, jumping into this information, being familiar with civil conflicts in other places and how they've started and what they've looked like will keep you from being caught off guard by this stuff. Because that's not how I would want to wake up in the morning, is to the sound of mortar fire, who knows what the fuck else, to people being dragged out of houses by unidentified state agents, or maybe even separatist militia movements, whatever. You can protect your community if you're prepared, and I think that's extremely important. And also, you know, looking into this, we're going to learn why this stuff is happening. We're going to figure out maybe some divides, like we're talking about, through all these different factions, and how they can be healed. And going back to what I said about urban areas and rural areas, there's no reason for this animosity between the two. There's reason for dialogue. There's reason for getting to know each other. If you live in a city, there's a great reason to go out and see where your food's coming from and what those people have to deal with, and vice versa. You know, if you're out in a rural area, you can go to a city and see what problems are there and figure it out. Yes, Treebeard quote from David. And yeah, Lord of the Rings expert Adam weighs in that David stole it. I don't know. Maybe David's Treebeard. But anyways, yeah, there needs to be some major healing, whether or not it's going to stop a conflict or whether or not it's going to prepare people. Because with that question of rural versus urban, I want to say the farming, the agriculture in California provides, I think it was 70-something% of food for the entire U.S. and also provides water for the northern area of California. That rural area provides water for the majority of people in California via pipelines, piping it down from Northern California to Southern California. And it could happen here. Robert Evans lays out very well exactly how easy it would be for the state of Jefferson separatists to completely cut off not only millions of people, tens of millions of people in Southern California from resources, and use that to get their demands, their separation, whatever, but also the rest of the country. Because California, Washington, Oregon, you know, the whole northwest to inland northwest region and everywhere in that general area provides most of the food for the U.S., and it's from rural areas, from people who are armed very well and have access to things that could cut off transportation of food and water to the rest of the country. So if that happens, you know, if the supply train is disrupted, good Lord, imagine the suffering that would come after that. One thing, imagine the suffering from people who already are living day to day, whether it's paycheck, food, whatever, who aren't stocked up and prepared, who have no idea where their food comes from, no idea where their water comes from, even necessarily in the case of California and Northern California pipeline to Southern California. It would just be a massive loss of life, sanitation, anything you could think of. Yeah, it is interesting to think that there's still some water left in California, CJ, but there is. I want to say Shasta County is where a lot of the pipelines are coming out of, and they're not, guarded. They're just out there. It's an interesting thing, and it's easily disrupted. And avoiding something like that from happening is, I think, incredibly important if you don't want to see a massive loss of life. If you don't want to see people die from, lack of sustenance, lack of water exposure, what have you. It's a scary thing to face. And the separation between the city centers and the urban areas and the way the governments are treating them is to be addressed. And not just the governments, but the way the people there are treating them. I think personally voting is useless. And that's why another reason why the show is called Beyond the Ballot. I think that people voting for these different, gas taxes, let's say, that affect rural communities much harder, I think that's useless because I think they're going to do what they want either way. Back when David was doing the show with me, we went into voting in an episode and why it's useless. And the example I love to bring up all the time is up here in Washington State, there's no income tax. The Seattle, where the state government, or maybe it's Olympia, wherever the fuck they are, but either way, the left side state government wants an income tax. It's been, quote unquote, voted down by people for 85 plus years, and they keep trying to push it through. They want it. And so they've said before that when they want it, they're going to disregard the people's vote on the matter, do a closed door meeting of state legislators, and push it through. They're going to vote themselves. That's how much power the vote has, is up until they don't want to listen anymore, or if they're even listening in the beginning, they'll do whatever they want. They're going to push through whatever they want. I think it's, in the case of like France and the Yellow Vests, I keep using that because it's very relevant to the urban centers versus the rural areas. It's extremely relevant that people can go out and fuck things up for the system to get them to stop. You can also, and that it's more effective than being a lone person or a small group of people out in a rural area that doesn't want to pay these gas taxes anymore, because obviously the gas taxes come out automatically as you pay for the gas. You can't stop that way. As far as other legislation that you don't want to follow, if you do have an active way to stop doing that, to stop following it, you're a small amount of people. You are open to state agents coming in and hurting you, caging you, doing whatever to get you to comply or take you out of that that part of the system and let it continue flowing smoothly. That's why things like I said, like the Yellow Vest disruptions, things like that are relevant. That's why food and water disruption would be relevant. It wouldn't take a ton of people. It would take, as they have come to calling themselves, Al-Qaeda. It would take people out in the country using insurgency tactics and cutting that shit off. It makes for a great bargaining chip, but there needs to be dialogue if we want to avoid that. Yeah, I want to get out there too. I want to get out there to these places and not just stream from my beautiful forest green screen background here. That's something else I wanted to talk about in the show as well. Is I got some goals. I got some goals for the show, and that's getting out there and doing this. I'd like to buy, a camera that I can take with me out to protests. Maybe go talk to a gathering of Antifa and see what's going on, because that's another thing I haven't seen is really an honest conversation from journalists to Antifa. You usually see Antifa owned by whatever on YouTube. I don't want to do that. I want to get out and interview people like the group in Oregon that there was no government help, so their little rural community got together and kept their town safe from the fires. All these different kind of things that people are doing on a non-government level, that they're doing by themselves with a community without using the state. I want to go talk to these people and show you guys. I want to bring a different perspective than what we're seeing out there. There's a few good ones. I think All Gas No Brakes is great at it. It's a little, more comedy influenced by the editing and whatnot. I really want to try to bring some more unbiased points of view from these people out into the open. So if you're interested in supporting that, I'll see if I can throw it up. I've been teasing it for probably a month now since the rebrand, that I'm putting up a goal on Patreon to procure this camera equipment to go out there and do it. It's only a few $100, but I was broke. I'm paying for a lot of stuff right now. So maybe we can crowdfund that. If not, I'm going to keep saving what I can and hopefully get that going. So if that's something you're interested, check out the Patreon. Let me know. Yeah. What else does anybody in the chat have for me? Anybody else got any questions? I mainly wanted to talk about the idea of a second American Civil War today. And we got into the breakdown of the groups and whatnot. I just talked for 40-something minutes without drinking my coffee, and I just realized it now. So sorry for that slurp sound if you're listening to this later. But yeah, there's a whole lot of wild shit going on out there. And I don't blame anybody for feeling stressed out by it. I was getting extremely stressed out during the rise of the Boogaloo idea before everything got axed on social media. Super paranoid because you get into this kind of loop feed, and you see this stuff and that's all you're seeing all the time. So you're getting nervous. Fuck, I got to stock up. There's going to be violence. There's going to be this and that. And I had to get off Facebook for a while, get out of that feedback loop and see what was going on with people in my community around me in the area I live, to kind of calm it down and be like, all right, it's fine to be prepared, but there's no need to freak out. Just be prepared, be steady, be ready. CJ King says the problem is right-leaning journos taking pictures and video that could potentially identify people at protests. Yeah, whether or not it's right-leaning or not. And of course, they don't want to be identified to cops and feds. Yes, whether they're right-leaning or not, there's that kind of, it kind of falls on both. So you have a responsibility, obviously, to stay unidentified if you don't want to be identified and put on a list by the state. And the right-leaning journalists and anybody with any bias against whatever group they're going up against are obviously, I'm not saying they're not trying to, because they are trying to take pictures and video and identify people. Like, that was the whole thing, is demasking Antifa in a lot of videos, all that kind of stuff. But cops have been out doing this since fucking, big ass video cameras with actual film cassettes in them. They've been out filming protests and all this stuff to get people on these lists. It's a thing that's never stopped. And with the rise of the surveillance state, it's just getting more and more. If there's anything on you to identify you at a protest, it's going to be checked against whatever other surveillance is being used in your area. There's facial recognition stuff that got approved either earlier this year or last year here in Washington state by Jay Inslee, the governor of the state, fucking idiot, for like an experimental trial, but it's approved for use for government. And it's something that people have talked a lot about on different podcasts, YouTube videos and stuff. But the masks, wearing masks out in public right now for COVID, whatever, is actually strengthening a lot of this AI, a lot of this facial recognition stuff, because it's helping them identify you by partial face instead of your whole face. So then if it's obstructed, like if you're wearing a mask to anywhere you go all the time and you're being watched by any of this surveillance stuff and the data is being compiled and put somewhere, and then you go to a protest and you wear the same style mask, they're going to be able to identify you. And it goes further than that too. It goes down to your gait, how you walk, all kinds of different stuff. Obviously tattoos and other markers, things like that. Your identity, I think, is your responsibility and has always been your responsibility, whether it's your physical identity that people see, whether it's your online identity. We all know the terms and service bullshit that comes along with using social media and whatnot, but nobody really looks into it to see that they're the commodity. That's why these are free, because your identity, your data is being sold. But it's a whole huge matter that you really need to pay attention to if you don't want it to be used in that way, if you want to stay unidentified. Oh, man, fuck. I hope Washington will not be back on full lockdown by Thanksgiving. That's a comment from CJ King. Maybe some counties will. The Spokane County and probably King County and, the really populated counties, because they're running it by phase up here. You're in different phases of lockdown depending on your number of cases and whatnot. And the more rural counties are like fucking 2 or 3 phases past the city centers. Nobody gives a fuck anyways. They just do what they want. But it's a possibility. I think there's a lot. I've been saying that, and I'm sure you have too, and plenty of other people have been saying that going into the fall and winter, going into the flu season, going into election season, all this stuff, there will be more lockdowns. There will be harsher lockdowns. There will be all this for all those different reasons. Political, scare tactics, what have you. It's definitely a possibility. It's one I don't want to see, though. So hopefully we don't see that. What do you guys think? You want to resist lockdowns? You think wearing masks are a good idea? I don't like necessarily shaming anybody for wearing masks. I think people can do what they want to do when they want to do it. I get the argument that it's just playing into what government wants. It's being dominated by government, whatever. But, do what you want. One of the things along with that is how people are saying, don't wear, or you got to listen to a private business when they tell you to wear a mask going into their establishment because it's their place, their rules. Those aren't their fucking rules. They're facing fines, shutdown, all kinds of stuff because the government has come in and said, you need to enforce this. If they're honest with their signs, like a store out by me says that masks required by proclamation, then they just let you, not wear a mask if you don't want to. That's what's happening. It's by proclamation. It's not by store management. Brett Go, what up? Brett says, my daughter's mother worked for DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. When they found out we were living together, they approached me for an interview and had a file on me with all my affiliations. They are gathering everything. Goddamn, man. How long ago was that? I want to know more about that. Tell me more. What were they looking at for you? And I'm not surprised either. We know that's happening. There's multiple people that we all know in this anarchist, kind of freedom sphere that have had these experiences with people, federal agents even coming to them and files. We know we're on a bunch of lists. Come on. But yeah, I haven't had that in-person thing either. That's interesting. Aaron Peterson, what up, man? Says, I have COVID right now. It's way overblown. Dang. Well, I hope you get better. It still does bug me a little bit, the idea of getting COVID because of the possible lung and or organ damage that may come out the other side from it. I have a friend who got it totally fine. Younger dude in his 20s, that super active, athletic and whatnot. He was down and out, lost his sense of taste and smell, and came right back to it. No permanent damage. So I don't know how overblown that is or not, but yeah, it's sense and smell, like Adam's saying, lost it for about a week. That's really weird how that happens. That's another thing we can talk about. What do you guys think of Trump getting COVID? Think it's real? You think it's going to kill him? You think the people wishing death on him are justified in doing that or not? I don't wish death on anybody. I don't like doing that. So, but I don't know. That's a whole convoluted thing. I think it's scary, the idea of Trump dying during this election season, because it's already so fucking wild, and people are already either anti-Trump, anti-Biden, vote the other way, no matter who, get them out, no matter who, get them in, no matter what, all that stuff. I think any more just absolutely chaotic nonsense in this is something that could cause a tipping point towards an American civil conflict. Yeah. David says, oh my God, there are people who have COVID in this chat. Let me get my mask. Wear your digital mask now. CJ King says, I don't buy anything the government says about anything. I think it's a glorified flu. Yeah, I understand that. What I'll say is I take anything the government says with a grain of salt. And I think that's important for a number of reasons. First of all, because the government isn't always wrong in their analysis of things. You know, if it's government, it's bad is not necessarily correct, because it's more nuanced than that. Especially when you're talking to people that you want to try to open their eyes to the idea of something different, handling things rather than government. Because there are good things that are handled by government, not necessarily good things coming from government, but let's go to the most basic, roads, right? You can't, it's hard to tell these people, you know, it's bad because government. It's easier to say, well, think about what the government's involvement in this is and why it could be handled better, handled more freely, handled more cheaply, all this different stuff. And if we're talking information from government, you know, bring other sources to the table, bring third-party sources. I think that's a huge thing that I'm surprised more people aren't working on, is more third-party, unbiased sources. And by unbiased, I mean unbiased in funding specifically, because we know that people looking into things generally, well, I don't even want to say generally, but we know it happens that their biases are fueled by who's paying them. Their results are fueled by who's paying them. So, yeah, I'd say take it with a grain of salt. I kind of got off the rails there, but let's go back to chat. Do you think Trump will try something to postpone the election because of his diagnosis, or can he even do anything? I mean, he's already talked about disrupting the election in different ways through getting rid of mail-in voting. I think he's talked about, or someone in the administration has talked about postponing it due to the pandemic, or maybe even the left side has talked about postponing it due to the pandemic. I could see it, though. I could see if he's sick enough that he can't go out and campaign and do things, especially after what I read today, that Biden's lead in the polls is up 14% after the debate. How? I don't fucking know. But if Trump feels like he's doesn't have the upper hand anymore and sees an opportunity, well, we need to push it back until I can really hit the trail again, I absolutely can see him doing that. Yeah, the government has not done anything to give me confidence in the arena of health. You're right. I can't think of anything like that anyways. But we're also people who think about this stuff and talk about this stuff with each other all the time, talking to each other once again. I'm just saying, when you're talking to other people about this stuff, it's a good idea to bring them in easy. You know what I mean? Because they still do have faith in government. And I can't get on board with the idea of just shaming people who don't know or have, I won't say don't know because it's ignorance by choice, but who haven't taken the time to look into something else. But you know what I'm saying. Anyways, Brett Go. So that DHS interview happened 8 years ago. It was during my active years in activism during the height of the Obama administration. I had ties to some quote-unquote criminal organizations as well. Yeah, fuck, man. So 8 years ago, and that it's just been wrapping up since then. So, yeah, everybody keep on guard. At this point, I don't think there's anything I can do not to be on these lists or be under the radar, because I'm right here talking about all this shit fucking live on the internet and 2 years of podcasts and, you know, social media posts and whatnot. So I'm going to have to take whatever precautions or defense moves I can. But, and Brett also says they were trying to tie groups together. They were fishing for information. It felt like they were trying to sense if I would cooperate. Negative, Ghost Rider. Yeah, that's right. That actually sounds very similar to the Kenosha situation with Kyle Rittenhouse and the source that I was in contact with for my episode on that. Everybody in the group that Kyle Rittenhouse had attached himself to were being visited and investigated by federal agents after that, but not for what you would think necessarily. Not just because they were there to protest and they were Boogaloo adjacent, but to see if there was any collusion with the unrest and the Kenosha PD, which was really interesting to get into. So if you haven't watched that episode, go back and check it out. it was good, and I got deep into that. CJ King asks, have you heard of the similar swine flu scare pushed by the government in the 1970s? Didn't end well. Yeah, they've pushed a whole lot of supposed pandemics and scares for that. And I don't really understand the difference with this one. So, yeah, Aaron Peterson, I'm in danger. Good job, Ralphie. It's true. It's true. Everybody's in danger with this nonsense. All right. I'll ramble for a couple more minutes while you guys throw some more questions at me, because we're coming up on the time that I want to keep the show at. Yeah, I do pay for my upload time and whatnot. That's why I keep it around an hour. But let me know what else you guys got. In the meantime, I'll plug my pluggables like I did at the beginning of the show. You can see up on the screen at Beyond Ballot Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you can go like those pages, check them out, subscribe, do whatever any of that is, I would appreciate it, because I haven't been able to move Enemy of the State Stank Podstash page over into, or rebrand it to Beyond the Ballot because of Facebook bullshit terms and whatnot. They won't let me change it because of violations to the page. So I need some help building the Beyond the Ballot social media and getting that stuff out there, because I'd like to be able to announce things like this live stream to everyone who just listens, because there's people who listen mostly in the U.S., but there's quite a few in the U.K. and other places, surprisingly, who don't see the updates on social media and whatnot. So hopefully we can build that so people see the updates. Like I mentioned before, if you want to support the work, patreon.com/beyondtheballot. I've restructured a lot of that stuff, and like I said, I'm going to make a goal for getting the camera equipment together to take the show on the motherfucking road. I would really like to get out there, into a fucking crazy, dangerous place maybe, or into a group of people who are facing off against another group of people and just screaming at each other, and ask them, what is this accomplishing, guys? You guys want to talk? Let's talk about some stuff. Let's see what you guys want. That's the kind of shit I want to go out there and do. That's the kind of shit I think would be really interesting. And I think the kind of, unbiased and the style of reporting that you don't see too much anymore, because everybody likes the gotcha stuff, and the algorithms are fueled by that more. But I'd like to get out and do that. So if you like that, check it out. You can also see on the screen next to me over here this beautiful new logo that I'm trying out. I'm trying out different backgrounds. I like the little bubbles on that one, but this was made by a friend, and I've also bought art from this person, my friend Claire. She makes great stuff. So tell me what you think of the new logo too. I'm going to be working on that, but I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, so I'll keep rambling for a couple more minutes. And if I see any more, I'll answer them. Otherwise, we'll be shutting down in just a couple minutes here. But yeah, that's the future I kind of want to do with the show. Also, if you guys have any guests that you want me to talk to, or any of these topics of different actions that people can take, anything else you want me to take a deep dive into, drop them in the comments here. Get at me on social media. You can go, like I said, at Beyond Ballot Pod or at Non-Voting Nick on everything. Hook me up with some people. I want to talk to a lot of people. I put together a bit of a list of people that I'm going to be going after to get on the show. One of them is Robert Evans, the guy I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, with his amazing different podcasts of his own and his own journalism that he's done. I really, really want to talk to him. Let me see who else. All right. So I want to talk to people promoting gun rights. I looked into the Firearm Policy Coalition. I think I want to talk to someone from there. I want to talk to people from the Free Thought Project. I guess that'd be Jason Bassler. That'd be cool. Let's see. Joel Salatin goes on everybody's show, so I think I could talk to him. Corey DeAngelis does a lot of education stuff about education, state education versus private education. He's into that. I'd like to talk to him. Dale Brown from, the Detroit Threat Management Center would be cool to talk to. All kinds of people. I also, this is one I forgot about too. I want to do an episode on breed-specific legislation and the stigma around pit bulls, because I love pit bulls. And I think that's a lot of stuff is really badly reported on pit bulls. I think they get the short end of the stick. So that's something I'll be jumping into as well. That's one of my passions. Blah, blah, what up? Just tuning in. Thank you for being a content creator. Hey, thank you for consuming my content. I appreciate it. I like being a content creator. And I will absolutely do a show from your hot tub, Aaron, after you're done with COVID. I would like to be able to smell and taste everything during this hot tub session. So let's do that. All right, y'all. This is the end of the episode. Thanks for listening. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. Hopefully the live stream was not too terribly glitchy. It sounds like the audio was good. I appreciate everybody showing up. Hope you enjoyed it, and take care.